Hello, Americans. This is Paul Harvey. Stand by for news.
Paul Harvey News. From Savannah, Georgia, the American Broadcasting Company and its affiliated stations presents Mr. Paul Harvey with his summary of world news and his personal comments. But before he begins, here is an announcement of interest to all of us. There's an old saying that the more things change, the more they stay the same. That's certainly true in the profession of news gathering. We have modern electronic equipment. We have Telstar. Things have changed since the days of the old leg man. But one important thing is news gathering is even more important now because of that very electronic progress, and that's enterprise. And enterprise is the trademark of ABC Radio's Tom O'Brien. If an important official or business leader is sitting on a story to prevent its being told, Tom O'Brien has the enterprise and the experience to get it told anyway. As a local New York City newscaster, he was the only reporter on the air with his own personal, private, European news source. Hear Tom O'Brien at his enterprising best on ABC Radio. And now, here is Paul Harvey News.
You heard? There'd been a fire in Atlantic City? Well, it's under control now, but a whole block of buildings, just a block away from the boardwalk, went up. 5 hotels and a rooming house destroyed, and an ancient apartment almost. More than 200 persons dead or presumed dead, and all of them were guests at the Surfside, a hotel for elderly persons. In the spotlight, Detroit's Tigers sure enough did it. Traded slugger Rocky Colavito to Kansas City. Traded Colavito and pitcher Bob Anderson, and money for 3. Jerry Lumpy, Ed Rocco, and Dave Wickershank. The Senate of the United States will not be quite the same without Carl Vinson. All of my life, he's been a fixture. For almost 50 years, this distinguished Georgia Democrat has been one of the most powerful voices in behalf of fiscal responsibility and military preparedness. His health appears fine, but Senator Vinson has had 80 birthdays, including today's, and he wants the rest of his years free from official responsibility. Georgia's Governor Sanders says this will facilitate redistricting in his state because there will be only 9 incumbents running now. Glenda Unterreiner, Secretary, 26. Moved from St. Louis, Missouri to New York City 6 weeks ago. Last night, she sat in front of her mirror, tiring her hair in her furnished room in Queens, and suddenly slumped over dead from a sniper's bullet through the window. The window through which the bullet came faces the Long Island Railroad tracks. Yale's Professor Barghorn, back home in Connecticut, says he was not spying in Russia, that there was no justification for his arrest and detention, says he was interrogated incessantly. At the same time, 11 Soviet scientists are today on an inspection tour of our National Atomic Laboratory in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Havana, ouch, communism hurts. They didn't tell us it was going to be like this. When Fidel Castro was leading his rebels down from the hills, he told them they were fighting Batista and the United Fruit Company and the imperialists of the United States. He promised all these things the rich people had, we the workers, one day will have. But he forgot to tell them they'd have to keep working. He neglected to explain that the rich people got rich the only way there is to get rich, by working, and this puts a different complexion on the revolution. The leisure-loving Latin who loves to sit in the shade or play in the surf saw the rich people languishing on the Veradero beaches and dreamed that this would be his life after the revolution. But now, well, Cuba is desperately hungry, a universally needy nation. They took it away from the rich people, all right. So now everybody is poor. And today the brutal taskmaster of the revolutionary government, Minister of Industry, Che Guevara, decrees longer hours with less pay in the cane fields and no malingering. Over Havana Radio, Guevara says Cuba's principal difficulty is the lack of desire of the people to work. So from now on, he says, any work stoppage will be construed as anti-revolutionary, and any striker will be shot. It's a rude awakening for the Cuban peasant. His work is harder, his reward is less than before. But perhaps worst of all, his dream is gone. The Goldwater notion has been seconded by the gentleman from Missouri, Republican National Committeeman Francis Corley. GOP congressional campaign chairman Bob Wilson says Senator Margaret Chase Smith deserves a crack at the title. Says he thinks she has great possibilities. You remember the old vaudeville saw about the soldier who said he was tossed into the guardhouse for going on a furlong? And his friend said, "You mean a furlough?" And he said, "No, a furlong." He says, "I went too far and stayed too long." Today, the Pentagon decreed a new limitation on travel restrictions for active duty servicemen. Too many have been trying to cover 1,000 miles on a brief leave, and it required dangerously fast driving. So now they've limited the furlong. The Navy, for example, says 300 miles is a reasonable par for a 3-day pass. How about that chap in New York? Stamp collector walked into the UN building a few months ago and bought 50 of the new 4-cent stamps, housing and urban development stamps, for $2. Sold them for $10,000. He noticed after he got home that they had an imperfection. The black color sections and the commemorative inscription were missing, and the firm to which he sold the stamps for $10,000 will resell those 4-cent stamps for $390 each, or a total of about $20,000. Today, you and I are visiting in the studios of WSGA in Savannah, Georgia, and over the desk, which I have borrowed for this day, is a message I read on an earlier visit today, but in case you missed it, I want you to hear it. It says, and hear this closely now, "You say one picture is worth 1,000 words? Well, let's see about that. You give me 1,000 words, and I'll give you the Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm, and the Hippocratic Oath, and a sonnet by Shakespeare, and the preamble to the Constitution, and Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and I'll still have enough words left over for just about all of the Boy Scout oath, and I wouldn't trade you those things for any picture on earth." Page 2. Free sample today. I know you've never heard an insurance man offer you a free sample of anything before. You know, one of the reasons, I think, is because for so many years we had to use what they call court-tested language. And so you had to have a Philadelphia lawyer sitting at your elbow before you could understand an insurance contract, and it wouldn't have made any sense for an insurance company to offer you a free sample. But now a policy has been written. It's part of the White Cross plan by Bankers Life and Casualty Company of Chicago. A policy has been written, the GR 739, which is so simple it's just about 250 words long. About one typewritten page. Easy to understand words. I can. Anybody can. Please let me see that you get a free sample of the policy. A free sample policy. You're not asked to buy it now, just to look it over, because it sounds too good to be true unless you see it in black and white. I'll see that you get one if you'll just write for your free sample policy to Paul Harvey, Box 6906, Chicago. This is Savannah, Georgia. It has been 7 years since I was last here. Some cities to which you return after a year or so are hardly recognizable anymore. Everything is uncomfortably unfamiliar. In Savannah, everything is comfortably familiar. Oh, there is some newness hereabouts, big upgrading of port facilities, but in Savannah the emphasis is not on newness. I spent last week in our nation's hard-riding, hairy-chested Southwest, out where men are men and everything has to be the newest and the biggest and the most expensive to be the best. This is Savannah, Georgia, where women are ladies and nothing else is worth hardly anything at all unless it's more than 100 years old. Where the new West is stimulating, the old South is refreshing. If the skylines are lower, the pace is slower, the pressures are less. Here and now, as 7 years ago, there is most interest in the restoration and preservation of ancient landmarks. I'll be speaking here tomorrow night to a Freedom Forum at Savannah's City Auditorium. Between now and then, looking about and listening and relaxing in the park-like atmosphere of a city where the streets detour around the trees. Here as elsewhere, Dixie is wrestling with its conscience these days. Here, where tradition is almost everything, the philosophical tradition is conservative, the political tradition is Democrat, and the two are on a collision course. Everybody still wants to be conservative, Everybody still wants to be a Democrat, and you can't be both anymore. It's a hurtful thing for an outsider to watch. It spawns compromise on the one hand and extremism on the other. Here, where a piece of furniture is made more precious by the scuffs and scars which are the patina of time, folks prefer their country and their political party and their society imperfect, without modification, modernization, homogenization. They don't think their old Constitution needs a Formica top. You familiar with the Route 66 television program? The cast and crew of this TV show are on location in Savannah this week. I breakfast with most of them in the mornings. They're shooting scenes for upcoming episodes and getting an early start these days because all of them want a little time off for Christmas if they can. But as I say, they're shooting scenes for their television program around the town, upsetting nobody. I mean, the stars and the starlets of the series go about their play acting almost unnoticed, or arousing only the most casual curiosity. This is Savannah, Georgia, and it always will be. Here is a potpourri of the day's news from page 3. Oh, in Nashville, Tennessee, Albert Henry Stone fell asleep at the wheel and his car ran through a busy intersection and jumped a curb and tore down a fence and bounced off 3 buildings before it stalled out. You know Henry's unhurt, but awake. Another thing you might have missed, there's a note on a placemat in a restaurant in Covington, Kentucky, which says, quote, 4,076 people last year died of gas. 29 inhaled it, 47 put a match to it, and 4,000 stepped on it. In a car wreck northwest of London, England, the Duchess of Bedford has suffered a concussion, and her 20-year-old daughter is all terribly smashed up. In Tampa, Florida, President Kennedy predicts that you and I will fly routinely. You and I will fly in space at 15,000 miles an hour. He predicts metro planes taking off from the downtown heart of a city, from the crowded center of the city, within 11 years. Baghdad, another scalp on Nasser's belt. The government of Iraq has been seized by that nation's armed forces. They've thrown out the Ba'ath Party, and they're moving now to merge with Syria and the UAR. An American Army sergeant killed in South Vietnam, the 76th American to die in that war. Now Venice, Italy, one of those rare cities which more than lives up to the travel folders, is going modern. The new civic hospital will be designed by a specialist in ultra-modern architecture. Our For What It's Worth department has an inside story. I mean, mostly for insurance men. A.S. Muir, Gisborne, New Zealand, claim examiner for the insurer, approved the woman's claim for £600 when she lost her valuable diamond ring. She lost her diamond now almost a year ago, and the insurance company paid her the thousands of dollars it was worth. The other day, the woman wrote that she had found the missing diamond. Mr. Muir read the first line of the letter, elated that his company would regain its loss now. She had found her ring. But then he read on, and the woman said she had found the ring, so she did not think it was fair to keep the money which the insurance company had paid her. So she had donated the money to the Boy Scouts. Paul Harvey. Good day.
Paul Harvey News will be heard tomorrow at this time over most of these stations with a summary of world news and his personal comments. This program came to you from Savannah, Georgia. This is the ABC Radio Network.
We take you now to Chicago and Paul Harvey.
Good evening, Americans. We are just never ready for this kind of thing in this country. We deplore the hotheads elsewhere in the world who change governments with guns, but we try to ignore the fact that now 4 of our own presidents have been cut down by assassins. It had been such a tremendous welcome at the Dallas airport and all along the parade route that Mrs. Kennedy, who had become perhaps his greatest political asset, turned to her husband and said, "You can't say Dallas wasn't friendly to you." Moments later, in the back seat of that open car, she cradled her husband's bleeding head in her arms, saying, "Oh no, oh no." Top speed, it was still 5 minutes to Parkland Hospital. Mrs. Kennedy did not collapse, no hysteria. When she entered the hospital, her chic fuchsia suit was covered with her husband's blood. President Kennedy, within 30 minutes, was dead from a bullet in his brain. There was another wound in the president's neck which could have been from the same bullet. Mrs. Kennedy's wish was to return to Washington immediately to be with the children. The bullets, by now you know, came from a warehouse window. On the 5th floor, police found the remains of some fried chicken and some paper. The assassin had waited there for some time, and a Mauser rifle with a scope sight, 3 cartridges fired, 1 still in the chamber. Dallas policemen advised that a suspect had entered a theater in the Riverside section, chased him there. There was a shootout. 1 policeman was killed. The suspect was captured, Lee H. Oswald, at 24. They dragged him from the theater screaming. Evidence is piling up against him. He was employed in the building where the murder weapon was found. Lee H. Oswald traveled in Russia in 1959, married a Russian woman, renounced his American citizenship, tried to apply for Russian citizenship. And it's significant to me that Moscow radio today hastened to say that our president had been killed by extreme right-wing elements. Now it develops the assassin's allegiance was red. He wore a brown shirt, uniform of a Castro-communist terrorist, and he, Lee Oswald, is chairman of the pro-Castro outfit called the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Governor Connolly, with a bullet through his back that came out his chest, fractured his wrist, underwent surgery. He is conscious, condition good. Vice President Johnson, who was riding in a separate car a considerable distance behind Kennedy's, was unhurt. Lyndon Johnson is now President of the United States. Within less than 2 hours of the president's death aboard the presidential plane in Dallas, Johnson took the oath of office sworn in by a woman judge and then took off with the widow and the body for Washington. When the first news came today, before it was even confirmed that the president had been killed, a flood of sell orders hit the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. They rang the bell, closed down for the day, but before they could, industrials had plummeted $21. And the commodity exchanges closed down, and Congress recessed, and sporting events most everywhere scheduled for tonight are canceled. Pope Paul, advised, went to his private chapel to pray. General Douglas MacArthur, in a telegram to Mrs. Kennedy tonight, said, quote, "I realize the utter futility of words at such a time, but as a former comrade in arms, his death kills something within me." The president's special car has a bulletproof bubble glass top, but the top was down today so that he could wave to the enthusiastic crowds. The Dallas reception was the most enthusiastic of any stop in Texas. For weeks, a big debate raged over who of the city's luminaries would get to sit at the head table this noon. Nobody did. And on the president's White House desk tonight are the calls and the callers and the documents and the urgent things to be done which could not possibly await his attention for another day. But they will wait now. It is for us that one must grieve tonight. For a generation which has so refined its intellect that it can split atoms and communicate with the moon, and yet remains at the mercy of its own undisciplined emotions. If the world is one day destroyed, it'll come just like this, you know. It'll not be the H-bomb that did it. It'll be the greed or the fear or the hate that set it off. Paul Harvey, good night.
ABC, Chicago.
Here's Paul Harvey, news and comment.
This morning, a man with a weapon was reported on the roof of the Internal Revenue Service building. That roof overlooks the Department of Justice entrance, through which Attorney General Robert Kennedy passes several times a day. Police raced to the red-tiled roof of that 7-story building, found nothing. One officer from the tower of the adjacent old post office building says he saw, on the roof of the Internal Revenue Service building, a man with what appeared to be a weapon, but careful scrutiny has revealed nothing. We will be chasing shadows for a while. Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy went back to his grave last midnight. Accompanied by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, she placed a sprig of flowers on the grave and spent several minutes there. In Dallas, Jack Ruby was indicted this morning. County grand jury has indicted him for, quote, murder with malice. The Dallas DA, Henry Wade, says Jack Ruby shot a handcuffed man. Deserves the death penalty. But San Francisco's criminal lawyer, Jack Ehrlich, the real-life Sam Benedict, says he may defend Jack Ruby, pleading temporary insanity. Texas Governor Connolly is recovering at Parkland Hospital, as doctors had hoped he would. And in Havana, Cuba's foreign ministry says it is true. Lee Oswald, the accused assassin of the president, Lee Oswald tried to travel to Cuba last September, that he wanted to go from there to Russia. Oswald went to Mexico City and applied at both the Russian consulate and the Cuban consulate for permission. His application stated that he had lived 3 years in Russia and that he was a communist. But when they told him there'd be a delay of 10 days to several weeks in processing his application, he angrily withdrew it and returned to the United States. Mrs. Marina Oswald, his widow, is receiving magazine offers for her life story. And in New York, 2 girls watched television yesterday. Johanna Malandroka, 13, and her 16-year young sister, Mary. They watched the honor guard at the funeral service, the precision with which the manual of arms procedure was executed, and they decided to try to imitate it with the rifle and shotgun owned by their older brothers. During their play acting, the 16-year-old girl pointed the rifle at her sister and pulled the trigger. It was unloaded. The 13-year-old girl pointed the shotgun at her sister and pulled the trigger. It was loaded. Time out in politicking. Republicans have agreed to a 30-day moratorium on partisan political activity to give the new president unanimous support. On Wall Street, the stock market opened higher this morning. Buy orders outnumbering sell orders 25-1. President Johnson, promised last night that he would seek congressional passage for that biggest tax cut in history. It is stalled in committee almost certainly until next year, but President Johnson means to see it through sooner or later. The president moved his office to the White House today, meeting with foreign leaders now, foreign leaders who are in this country. Tomorrow he's going to address a joint session of the Congress. One of today's meetings, Soviet Deputy Premier Mikoyan, and I understand Mikoyan brought with him a personal message from Khrushchev for the new president, possibly seeking a summit meeting. During yesterday's Washington reception for foreign dignitaries, de Gaulle was overheard to say to Mikoyan, "You've got to understand that what is good for France is not necessarily bad for Russia." End quote. President de Gaulle is going home now, but he'll return to the United States next year to try to bridge the differences which recently have divided us. Fighting has erupted in central Venezuela today. Up to now, red rioting in that South American country has been limited mostly to Caracas near the coast. Last night there was a 3-hour pitched battle between red guerrillas and troops for a premium prize in Puerto Cabello. You see, the troops were guarding an arsenal. And yesterday, these Castro-uniformed terrorists bombed 6 United States oil and gas pipelines in Venezuela. Well, here we go again. Marquette University students say they're going to dribble a basketball around Lake Michigan. From Kalamazoo, Michigan to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They'll keep the ball bouncing until the Western Michigan-Marquette game December 7th. In the spotlight, Chicago's Blackhawks are becoming the New York Yankees of ice hockey, developing individual excellence. Of all the leading scorers in the league, the Hawks now have 3 of the top 4 and 6 of the top 10. Golf pro George Bolesta is dead. Member of a prominent golfing family in Tampa, Florida, himself a pro in Danville, Illinois, 45. The Railroad Arbitration Board this afternoon will rule on the union's demand to keep firemen on trains, and I believe the Arbitration Board will rule no. South Korea goes to the polls today. After 2 years of military rule, South Korea is electing a National Assembly today. Page 2. Today's Wall Street Journal comments editorially that many Americans have yielded to the hysteria they charge to others. That many Americans have yielded to the hysteria they charge to others. Many Americans, including commentators and congressmen and churchmen. A senator who sought to indict, quote, the people of Dallas. A Supreme Court judge who prematurely and erroneously blamed rightists for the president's killing. A newspaper of renown which blamed everybody And the Journal goes on today to say that a dictator must move everywhere, secretly, and under heavy guard. But an American president is dead because he was so generally beloved and so universally respected by loyal Americans that he moved freely among the people. That the police did not check every window only because for so many years our presidents have moved freely among our people. There have ever been madmen in the world, but that does not discredit a city or a system. It is more than nonsense to say that the good people of Dallas, crowding the streets to honor a president, share a Marxist murderer's guilt. That's the essence of today's Wall Street Journal editorial. May an analyst analyzing the analyst said, just this word of my own, I've always known that we have a big league team of newsmen in Dallas generally, and at WFAA particularly. I trust everybody knows it now. Here is a potpourri of the day's news from page 3. Lawrence Welk, recuperating from abdominal surgery in Santa Monica, is doing fine. Oh, Brendan Behan, the bibulous Irish playwright, has a father, 6-pound daughter. His wife Beatrice made the announcement. She said Brendan was somewhere celebrating. On the medical front, the government of Canada is launching a nationwide campaign to discourage cigarette smoking. The federal government of Canada decrees that the case against the cigarette has been proved. Incidentally, college newspapers have been thrown for a financial loss by the fact that cigarette advertising has been eliminated. Some have had to cut down the number of pages, but all have survived. I'm talking now about college newspapers in our own country. But you want to walk safe. Stay in Paxton, Massachusetts. I learned today that not one pedestrian has been killed in Paxton since the town was incorporated in 1765. Miami known sex offenders are being rounded up. More than 100 known sex offenders are at large around Miami, and today they're being rounded up for questioning while homicide tries to find the killer of a 10-year-old Lorraine Thornbond. There's a classified ad in today's London Times, says, quote, Christine Darling, sorry to miss our wedding date. Busy seeking change of advertising agency, wed you later. Signed copywriter. The new general of the Salvation Army, Frederick Coots, says the Army's trumpets and tambourines are going to be augmented by electric guitars. General Coots says, quote, the Army is going to get with it. End quote. Bloomington, Illinois Pantagraph was first, I think, to urge that Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy be made a sort of secretary for culture in the Johnson administration. There has so far been no official indication that she will be. From maternity hospitals across the nation comes word today of scores of new babies named for the late president, 20 that I know of in just Minneapolis and St. Paul. A society wedding upcoming in Chicago. Mrs. Chesser Campbell, the widow of the former publisher of the Tribune, and Arthur Schlamann of Ontario Paper. A merger is upcoming between Jewel Tea and Star Market, and a new type dollar bill is today in circulation. 50 million new dollar bills, Federal Reserve notes, released through the 12 Federal Reserve banks and their 24 branches. They'll get to you through regular commercial banking channels. The notes are very similar to the present dollar silver certificates, but those are going to be withdrawn from circulation. The new bill will not contain any reference to silver. Oh, FYI, the FBI is reported positive that Lee Oswald killed the president. But the FBI, to intercept any possible doubt which might becloud history, is building all available evidence into an irrefutable case. And President Johnson has promised that all of the facts which the FBI is presently uncovering and putting together will be made public. Paul Harvey. Good day.